begin with Colonel Sanders' original recipe at KFC, which may have had some extra ingredients after inspectors found live roaches crawling near food inside one location.
Before you grab that bucket of fried chicken, you might want to hear what's really going on behind those crispy golden breading and secret herbs and spices. We're diving into 10 reasons that might make you think twice about your next KFC run. Number 10 on our list takes us straight to the nutritional breakdown, and trust me, the numbers aren't pretty. Let's start with what you're actually putting into your body when you order that classic original recipe chicken breast. You're looking at 390 calories, which might not sound terrible until you realize that's just the chicken. But here's where it gets interesting. That same piece packs 1,190 milligrams of sodium. To put that in perspective, the American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams per day for adults. That single chicken breast just ate up over half your daily limit before you've even touched the sides. Now, if you prefer the extra crispy version, those numbers jump even higher. We're talking 530 calories and 35 grams of fat in one piece of chicken. The breading and extra frying time basically turn that chicken into a fat and calorie bomb. And most people aren't stopping at just the chicken. Add in the mashed potatoes with gravy. That's another 130 calories and 520 milligrams of sodium. Throw in a biscuit. You've just added 180 calories and another 520 milligrams of sodium. Oh, and don't forget the coleslaw, because that's 170 calories despite being a vegetable side. The real kicker comes when you look at their famous bowl. This thing is basically KFC's greatest hits all mixed together in one container, and it clocks in at 590 calories with an absolutely staggering 2,160 milligrams of sodium. That's almost your entire day's worth of sodium in one bowl. If you eat this regularly, you're basically setting yourself up for hypertension and cardiovascular problems down the road. Your blood pressure isn't going to thank you for this, especially if you've got any pre-existing conditions. Here's what a typical meal looks like when you add it all up. One chicken breast, some mashed potatoes, coleslaw, and a biscuit will set you back 1,270 calories and 2,390 milligrams of sodium. That's more sodium than you should have in an entire day, and we haven't even talked about what you might drink with it. The Centers for Disease Control tells us that over 40% of American adults are obese, and meals like this are a huge part of why. These aren't occasional treat numbers, these are serious health concern numbers. Moving to number 9, we need to talk about what happened in 2002 at a KFC in Lafayette, Colorado. A salmonella outbreak hit several children who had eaten there, and this wasn't just a simple case of food poisoning. One child ended up needing multiple surgeries because of complications from the infection. The Marler Clark law firm got involved and filed lawsuits because investigators found cross-contamination and poor hygiene practices in that kitchen. When you're running a busy fast food operation, these things can happen, but that doesn't make it any less scary for parents. Fast forward to 2024. KFC had to pull onions from their restaurants during a nationwide E. coli scare that was tied to McDonald's. While no direct cases were linked to KFC, the fact they had to take precautions shows how interconnected these supply chains are and how quickly problems can spread. Then there was that viral video from 2013 that resurfaced in 2017 showing employees repackaging old food. KFC came out and said they'd improved their protocols. But once you see something like that, it sticks with you. The CDC estimates that 48 million Americans get food poisoning every year, and a lot of that comes from undercooked or mishandled poultry. Every time you eat at a fast food chicken place, you're essentially rolling the dice that proper food safety protocols were followed that day, by that specific crew, in that specific kitchen. Sometimes corners get cut when it's busy, and that's when people get sick. Number 8 brings us to the animal welfare side of things, and this is where organizations like PETA have been banging the drum for years. Back in 2004, PETA investigators went into a West Virginia slaughterhouse that supplied KFC and filmed workers stomping on live birds and scalding them alive. The footage was brutal and hard to watch. KFC eventually adopted what they call key welfare indicators in 2020, which includes targets for reduced mortality rates, but problems still exist in the U.S. supply chain. The chickens used by KFC suppliers are bred to grow incredibly fast. These birds reach slaughter weight in just 30 days, which is insane when you think about it. That rapid growth causes all kinds of health problems for the chickens themselves, including lameness, heart issues, and organ failure. They're crammed into crowded sheds where they can barely move, standing in their own waste, which leads to ammonia burns on their feet and bodies. The mortality rate sits around 4% per flock, which means thousands of birds are dying before they even make it to slaughter. KFC says they've made improvements, and they did pledge in 2017 to eliminate antibiotics used in human medicine from their chicken supply. That's good for fighting antibiotic resistance, but it doesn't address the fundamental welfare issues these birds face. PETA has been calling for controlled atmosphere killing and an end to growth drugs, changes that have happened in Canada but haven't fully materialized in the U.S. market. When you bite into that chicken, there's a whole ugly process behind it that most people would rather not think about. Coming in at number 7 is the environmental impact, and this is where things get really big picture. Animal agriculture accounts for 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and KFC's supply chain is a major contributor to that. Back in 2019, investors managing $6.5 trillion in assets sent a letter to KFC urging them to set concrete emissions reduction targets. They pointed out that raising all those chickens requires massive amounts of feed, which leads to deforestation, and all that livestock produces waste that pollutes water supplies. The numbers on water usage are pretty staggering too. Livestock operations use about 10% of global water flows, and that's becoming a bigger problem as climate change makes water more scarce in certain regions. Greenpeace went after KFC back in 2012 for using rainforest fiber in their packaging, which led to some changes toward more sustainable options. KFC has set goals to reduce emissions by 46% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. But critics point out that their expansion plans are moving faster than their sustainability efforts. In the U.S., specifically, fast food restaurants generate enormous amounts of waste. All those buckets, boxes, cups, napkins, and plastic utensils add up quickly, and most of it ends up in landfills. The EPA has been pushing stricter regulations on pollution, and fast food chains are increasingly in the crosshairs. Every time you order from KFC, you're contributing to a system that has a pretty hefty environmental footprint. At number 6, we're looking at labor practices, and this is an area where KFC franchises have run into some serious legal trouble. In 2025, a class action lawsuit was filed in New York against KFC franchise operators for violating Fair Workweek laws. The lawsuit alleged that workers weren't getting predictable schedules, weren't paid proper overtime, and could be terminated without just cause. One particularly nasty practice mentioned was clopening, where workers close the store late at night and then have to come back and open it early the next morning without proper rest time. The fast food industry as a whole has a reputation for low wages and high turnover, and KFC is no exception. Workers at various locations have staged walkouts over unfair practices, and reports of poor working conditions pop up regularly. While corporate KFC likes to talk about ethical standards and proper treatment of employees, the reality is that franchise operations vary wildly in how they actually treat their workers. Some franchises do things by the book, others cut corners and exploit their employees. The thing about franchise systems is that corporate can set all the policies they want, but enforcement is inconsistent. Workers at one KFC might have a completely different experience than workers at another location just a few miles away. Unpredictable scheduling makes it nearly impossible for workers to plan their lives or hold down second jobs, which many need because the wages are so low. This affects the quality of service you get too, because burned out, underpaid employees aren't exactly motivated to give you their best work. Number 5 dives into the additives and ingredients that make KFC taste so good, and some of these might surprise you. Monosodium glutamate, better known as MSG, is used in their chicken and fries to amplify those umami savory flavors. Some items contain up to 1.1 grams of sodium, partly from MSG. The FDA says MSG is generally recognized as safe, but there are plenty of anecdotal reports and some studies suggesting that excessive intake can cause headaches, nausea, and other symptoms in people who are sensitive to it. Then there's TBHQ, a preservative used in the oils. At high doses, this stuff can cause nausea and delirium, though the levels in food are supposed to be regulated to stay safe. The famous 11 herbs and spices blend includes white pepper, which contains piperine. This compound can stimulate digestion, but it also creates a tingling sensation that research suggests might enhance the addictive quality of the food. Combined with the high calorie density, especially in the chicken skin, which can hit 5.0 on the density scale, these ingredients tap into evolutionary cravings that make it really hard to stop eating once you start. The breading and frying process creates what food scientists call a bliss point, that perfect combination of fat, salt, and flavor that lights up the reward centers in your brain. This isn't an accident. Fast food companies employ food scientists specifically to engineer products that are as craveable as possible. The end result is food that's scientifically designed to make you want more, even when you're full and even when you know it's not good for you. At number 4, KFC's marketing has landed them in hot water more than once. The 2025 Gravy Cult advertising campaign drew 600 complaints to the UK's Advertising Standards Authority because people thought it mocked Christianity and promoted cannibalism. While that controversy happened overseas, it shows the kind of edgy marketing approach KFC sometimes takes. In the US, a 2023 out-of-home campaign faced allegations of racism because it featured only black people eating chicken, playing into old stereotypes that the company should have known to avoid. Marketing controversies matter because they reveal how a company thinks about its customers and the broader culture. When ads are tone-deaf or potentially offensive, it suggests that somewhere in the approval process, nobody stopped to think about how different groups might perceive the message. This is especially important in diverse U.S. markets where companies need to be sensitive to historical contexts and current social dynamics. KFC isn't alone in making these mistakes, but they've definitely had their share of campaigns that made people scratch their heads or get genuinely offended. The broader issue with fast food marketing is how it targets kids and low-income communities. You'll notice KFC locations tend to cluster in certain neighborhoods, and their advertising strategies reflect that demographic targeting. Whether that's ethical is a whole other debate, but it's something to be aware of when you think about who these companies are trying to reach and why. Number 3 takes us into KFC's legal history, which is longer and more complicated than you might expect. The 2006 lawsuit from the Center for Science in the Public Interest alleged that KFC meals contained 15 grams of trans fats, which at the time was a huge health concern. Trans fats are basically poison for your cardiovascular system. KFC eventually settled and switched to canola oil in 2007, eliminating trans fats from their menu, but the lawsuit highlighted how the company had been using unhealthy ingredients for years. More recently, in 2024, KFC filed a trademark lawsuit against Church's Chicken over the phrase original recipe. KFC claimed Church's was trying to steal their intellectual property and confuse customers. While that might seem petty, it shows how protective these companies are of their branding and market position. The Salmonella lawsuit from that 2002 Colorado outbreak is another example of legal trouble stemming from operational failures. These lawsuits aren't just legal curiosities, they represent real problems that affected real people. When companies get sued over food safety or false advertising or labor violations, it's usually because someone got hurt or cheated. The legal system is often the only way to hold large corporations accountable when they cut corners or put profits ahead of people. KFC's legal track record suggests a pattern of issues that required outside intervention to fix. This brings us to number 2, and this is where things get really serious. Multiple studies and health reports point to fast food consumption as a major driver of chronic disease in America. KFC's menu items are perfect examples of why. That high sodium content we talked about earlier, it directly contributes to hypertension. The saturated fats accumulate in your arteries, leading to cardiovascular disease. The lack of fiber and the high calorie density promote obesity, which is linked to type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, sleep apnea, joint problems, and a whole host of other conditions. Research published in PubMed specifically calls out how frequent consumption of high-fat, low-fiber fast food contravenes U.S. dietary guidelines. When you eat KFC regularly, you're not just having an occasional treat, you're actively working against your long-term health. The problem is that this food is cheap, convenient, and engineered to be delicious, so it's really easy to fall into a pattern of eating it more often than you should. A lot of Americans are living in food deserts where KFC and other fast food chains are more accessible than grocery stores with fresh produce. The CDC data on obesity rates is alarming, and fast food plays a significant role in those statistics. We're talking about 40% of American adults being obese, not just overweight. That's a public health crisis, and the food environment, which includes chains like KFC, is a major contributing factor. The portion sizes have gotten bigger over the years, the sodium levels remain sky high, and the nutrient density is incredibly low. You're getting lots of calories, but very little of what your body actually needs. Think about it this way. If you eat KFC once a week, that's 52 times a year. You're consuming meals that exceed your daily sodium limits and pack way more saturated fat than you should be eating. Over time, that adds up. Your body can handle the occasional splurge, but when it becomes a regular habit, the health consequences become almost inevitable. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States, and diet is one of the biggest risk factors. KFC's menu is basically a textbook example of what not to eat if you want to avoid cardiovascular problems. And now we've arrived at number 1, the biggest reason to reconsider your KFC habit. And it comes down to this simple fact. There are better alternatives that give you similar satisfaction without all the negative baggage. Chick-fil-A's grilled nuggets come in at 140 calories for an 8-pack, which is a fraction of what you'd get from KFC. Chipotle bowls can be customized to be high in protein and nutrients while keeping sodium reasonable. If you're cooking at home, air-frying chicken reduces fat content by about 75% compared to deep frying while still giving you that crispy texture. The availability of healthier options means you don't have to sacrifice convenience or flavor to eat better. More and more restaurants are offering grilled versions of their menu items, salads with lean proteins, and sides that actually contain vegetables. Grocery stores are stocking more pre-marinated, ready-to-cook options that you can throw in the oven or air fryer. The time investment is minimal, the cost is often comparable or even cheaper than eating out, and the health benefits are enormous. What makes this the number 1 reason is that it removes the excuse of necessity. You don't need KFC. There was a time when fast food filled a real gap in terms of convenience and affordability, but that era is largely over. You have options now, better options, and choosing them is choosing to invest in your long-term health. Every meal is a choice, and every choice either moves you toward better health or away from it. KFC consistently moves you in the wrong direction. The last 2 reasons, the health implications and the availability of alternatives, really drive home why you should be seriously reconsidering whether KFC deserves a place in your diet. The evidence is clear, the options are available, and the choice is yours to make. So there you have it, 10 solid reasons to skip KFC next time you're thinking about fried chicken. Your heart, your wallet, and honestly your taste buds will probably thank you once you discover what else is out there.